Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the Vertica Data Disruptor webinar titled Delivering Personalized Retail Promotions Using AI and Predictive Analytics. My name is Carlo Rioli. I'm the EMEA Marketing Manager for Vertica, and I'll be hosting today's event. Today with us, we will cover how Segment SO1 is helping retailers to better engage customers. How they tap into historical baskets, loyalty, and how they use artificial intelligence to create millions of automated optimized promotions. In order to do so, let me introduce our guest. First of all, today we will have Stefan Visarius, Director of Customer Acquisition and Success, and Patrick Koritzna, I hope I pronounce it well, Patrick, Software Engineer. Hi, Stefan, Patrick, welcome. Stefan, can you introduce yourself and tell a bit of what you do?
Sure, thank you very much, Carlo. As Carlo said, my name is Stefan. I'm with SO1 for 5 years now. Originally, my background is in FMCG retail. I worked a few years for Mars in promotions specifically. Then I also worked for Payback, which is a large multinational loyalty program. And here I worked in marketing and sales. And at SO1, the title seems a little bit difficult, customer acquisition and success. Basically, it's marketing and sales, so that should make it easier for you.
Perfect, thank you. Patrick, can you as well tell us a little bit of yourself?
Of course, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Koritzna. So that was close enough pronunciation of my name. Don't worry about it, though. I am a software engineer at SO1. I work here for over a year now. I also work very closely with data engineers and data scientists in our company.
Thank you very much. Now, before we start, I tell you a little bit about our journey today. First of all, I will start with Stefan and Patrick will start with their presentation. They will split into a more business overview and then a technical part. After that, we will have a very, very brief intro on Vertica. But the important thing is to remind you that all during the session, while the presenter are speaking, you can insert your question. At the very end, we will have a rich Q&A session where the question you put will be answered. To do so, please use the window below the window below your screen and just hit submit. As a reminder, I also have to tell you that you can maximize your screen by clicking the double arrow button in the lower right corner of the slides. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and even after the presentation, it will be available on demand along with a PDF copy of the slides. Now let's get started, and Stefan, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. So here we are. Hold on a second. It's the typical showcase problem. Sorry for that. Okay, so now here we are. Sorry for the delay. Basically, what we are doing is, we jump right into the personalized retail promotions experience. What we're doing is we help retailers personalizing their experiences. And I'm sure you all know how good personal relationships feel to you. So, for example, when you go shopping, we all love it if retailers remember who we are, if they have a little chat with us, if they understand our preferences or make us offers that are tailored to our needs. And just a few decades ago, this was quite standard, and it still is for some small neighborhood markets, of course. But most retailers, today's reality looks a bit different. So too often, we are just any anonymous person, and the staff of the retailer doesn't really know us, and we are overwhelmed by far too many offers. Offers we don't really care about, as these offers don't fit to us. Nevertheless, brands and retailers in fast-moving consumer goods spend a lot of money, like $500 billion per year on discounts alone. And it feels like everyone is trying to get your attention as a customer with even lower discounts and massive promotions like buy one, get one free and the like. Well, I think it doesn't come as a surprise that all these discounts lead also to some negative effects. The first is stockpiling. So even if a promotion makes you buy 2 cans of beans instead of 1, it's already stockpiling, because the likelihood to buy another one next week at the retailer at a regular shelf price just decreased. Also, offering something that a consumer would have bought anyway at a retail stores is also not really smart. It's substitution. And of course, if a retailer or brand runs mass marketing activities, they will never get the level of discount right for all the consumers. Too often, they will just give too much discount, while some consumers would have purchased it for less, others even without any discount at all. So for some consumers who are just not into Nutella, no matter how high the discount is, it's even a waste of precious advertising space. And finally, if you manage all these mass promotions, it's really getting an operational challenge, because retailers have to plan the right volumes, have to ask their suppliers maybe for additional shifts to produce these stocks, get these volumes shipped to the warehouse, and then to store that in your shelf. So it's really, really a lot of things that you have to do. So in the end, on a global level, about 59% of promotions don't break even, as they are unrelated to the shopper's needs, are over-discounted, and are replacing planned purchases. And in the United States, it's even more than 70% of promotions that waste your money. Now, the founders of our company have a background in fast-moving consumer goods, as myself. And for them, it was painful to see how much money got burned while managing large consumer brands. But they also knew that, in theory, price differentiation, ideally on the level of an individual consumer, would solve all these problems. And so they founded SO1, which is short for segment of one. And they started researching the problem and coding the first algorithms. And for the last 6 years now, we've heavily invested into our proprietary technology, into great people with very different backgrounds, ranging from physics to statistics, biology, data science to marketing. And we've invested into scientific cooperations with leading universities like the MIT in Boston or Chicago Booth. And thanks to this combination of science and technology, we are today able to significantly increase the promotion efficiency in retail with a fully automated solution. It is our vision to help retailers offline and online to move away from those segments of many, so away from mass marketing, and instead cater for each individual consumer's needs and preferences, and tailor efficient promotions around the smallest possible segment, which is the segment of one. And this is, again, where our name comes from. So online, this is quite easy because we all can experience how well it works. As consumers, we get quite fitting recommendations, for example, for music from Spotify, or videos, or news from Twitter, or things we search for on Google, or even on Amazon. But at SO1, we started with offline retail in Germany, especially with groceries and drugstores in mind. And if you know the German market, you know that this is quite a difficult one, with Aldi and Lidl firing up the competition. But we thought, if we make it here, we can make it everywhere. So we basically created the concept of what we call personalized feeds, and what you can see here on the left-hand side. That is a ranked list of promotions, ads, or product-related content, like recipes. And these feeds are created fully automatically and are meant to influence the individual purchase decision of the consumer. And this is possible thanks to the selection of highly relevant offers at perfect discounts. And finally, this feed is also optimized towards the retailer's financial goals, so it can avoid substitution of planned purchases, for example. Now, the question is how to create these kind of optimized feeds for one person. And basically, we have to consider here millions of data, which is why we've built our own artificial intelligence to get this job done. And to run properly, this AI, of course, has to understand the available data and has the goal, or has to understand the goal that it has to optimize for. Now, to explain this a little better, I brought this example. Let's say it's an example for autonomous driving. Here, of course, it's important that if you look at image recognition and an AI that can do that, that the AI can detect obstacles like cars or people. So it's quite obvious that if this AI has to detect these kind of obstacles, it first has to be trained on how the shape of a car looks like, or how the shape of a person or a street sign looks like, to then detect these different obstacles while driving. But the question is now, how can we optimize for revenue? Or how can we recognize the revenue? Or how can we train a system what profit looks like? Now, basically, to recognize revenue, we need four things. First, we have to understand products and their attributes. So this is the question here. Is this bottle bottle you can see, is this a red wine or white wine? Does it come, as you see, in a bottle or maybe in a carton? Is it low, medium, or high priced, and is the label cheap or expensive looking? These kind of things we have to understand for a product to then be able to put the consumer into this picture. Because secondly, we have to understand what is the single consumer likes and what not. So which preferences are driving a consumer to buy a specific, for example, chocolate brand or not. Third, we have to understand what are they willing to pay for a box of apples. Do we need a discount or not? And if yes, how much? And fourth, we have to understand how likely the consumer will buy, for example, a detergent at a certain moment in time. So is he or she willing to buy it in the next trip or not? If we know that, we can make up our decision of recommendation something to him or even not. So all of this is then also combined with the retailer's business goals. So, for example, if a retailer wants to drive revenue, the feed that we produce, the feed of offers, will have a totally different look than it would have for profit or for customer satisfaction or for loyalty. So our AI optimizes for these different business goals. And finally, we also optimize for different communication channels, because the consumer might need different offers if he or she is planning a trip home or is already standing inside the store. So I think the basic concept is quite clear. Our AI understands products, consumers, prices, and the retailer's business in a fully automated manner to come up with highly relevant promotions for each single customer. But now let's dive a little bit into how we do all this, because for me, as a non-machine learning guy, this is still quite fascinating. First of all, the only data that we get are transaction data. So basically, we know the GTINs, or product IDs, that are purchased together in one basket. But remember, it's just the numbers, just the GTIN. We don't have any additional master data, or don't use that, because these are often wrong or not capturing the truly relevant attributes. Now, when you look at this picture, you see that ideally, we also are able to combine baskets with an identifier, which is, for example, a hashed custom ID, like a loyalty card number. But again, except for this ID, we know nothing about the customer, neither age, nor gender, nor whatsoever. Still, the good thing is, each basket tells us a story, because the products purchased within one basket are purchased for a specific reason. That is, the shopper likes these products, or the products share some commonalities, which we then call attributes. So these attributes might be that these products have low carbs, contain nuts, might feed your cats, or they smell great while keeping your house clean. So whatever the attribute is, we don't really care. And you see for this number below, for this GTIN below, there are 4 different attributes listed. Now, if we look into millions of baskets, we can basically understand these patterns that I just described very well. Like, if you like strawberries, we'll find many products with strawberry flavor in your basket. So from these millions of baskets, we can then derive many different attributes, like the 4 that you can see here. We, as I said, don't know the name of the attribute, but we can understand if the correlation with the attribute, for example, D1, is high or low. And D1, for example, as an attribute, could, for example, be the level of perceived healthiness of a product or the amount of carbs that it contains. But basically, the system, as I said, doesn't know if it's healthiness or carbs, and it just needs to understand that these are differentiating in the eyes of the consumer, and that these are relevant factors driving a purchase decision. Now, we run this automated identification of products for all the products in the store, and we come up with about 800 relevant but different attributes per product. So this gets quite complex. For us humans, it's really hard to capture. And to make these 800 different dimensions across all these thousands of products better digestible, we just told our system, well, please group products together in a two-dimensional map only, such that the closer the products are, the more similar they are in the eyes of the consumer. So the closer, the more similar. And the system came up with this map that you can see on the right. It contains about 10,000 dots, representing the 10,000 best-selling items in a German supermarket chain. And to make it even more readable, we then manually colorized the dots, and we added the lines that you can see. And now let's move into this map. If we look deeper into it, we see that the system, so the AI, was able to derive a perfect consumer view on the products simply by looking at the numbers of the G10s. Because what it does is it clusters the products together that make sense for the consumer. And that can be different reasons. So the AI can identify categories, like you can see on the very top left, dog food. And of course, dog food is quite far away from the top right, which is cat food, because normally you don't feed your dog with cat food. And as humans, we know this, but we have now trained the system to also understand this fully autonomously. And when you look further down, we see a cluster that describes an intended use case, like breakfast, so containing products like jam, coffee, bread, and butter. But like in a German supermarket, this is not a category that you can find put together in one shelf. You will find these products on different shelves and even in different aisles, because retailers think differently about categories than a consumer would do. And then, of course, we can also understand clusters like recipes, like a typical Mexican dish, or clusters like specific target audiences, products that are used for target audiences, like the gluten intolerance cluster here. Now, when we zoom into this map and have a look at, for example, one of these categories, we see that some products are located right next to each other. And they are so close that in the eyes of the consumer, they don't really differentiate. So if the system now wants to automatically optimize for example, incremental revenue, it better not replaces the Kellogg's Crunchy Nut with a recommendation for Nestle Gold, because those products substitute each other and they don't create incremental revenue. But of course, some products from different categories go very well together because they're complements. So if the system understands these correlations, it can easily inspire customers with recommendations to add some nice cheese or red wine to the planned Italian dish that they have. And this is just a last example where the system understands that these products that you can see here, they all belong together because they are all targeted at children at a certain age. And we will find this information in master data? Most likely not. And this is why we don't rely on master data. This is why we've built this own system to understand product properties. And after we've understood products, and after we've created these 800-dimensional attribute space, and you just see now a 3-dimensional space, but let's imagine it would be an 800-dimensional space. We can now add the single consumer into the space to see how close or how far away products are to this consumer. And again, the closer the products are, like the Coca-Cola on the right, the less discount we need to move the consumer towards this product. But if a product is far away, like on the very left, the Häagen-Dazs ice cream, we just need much more discount to make the consumer consider this product to purchase within the next shopping trip. So you could say basically the implicit result of our AI is a kind of a user profiling, which is simply based on basket data or simply derived from basket data. So the system understands the consumer and his preferences. And this understanding and this profiling capability can also be of help for retailers' CRM departments. Because when you look at CRM data, they are mostly incomplete, for example, with regard to household size or household income, or other information are completely missing. But more importantly, as a retailer, you only look at your own data, so you don't know what happens outside of your stores. But you might want to know how loyal the consumer is to your store, or how much or what the consumer spends also at your competitors. And for that, we've built a product which we call Attribution Plus. Now, this is one of our new solutions, and this solution can answer these questions. So, for example, what a consumer buys elsewhere. And it works just with the help of household panel data, like those from GfK or Nielsen, and it translates the basket data based on our understanding of the household panel into relevant CRM attributes, such that the retailer finally has full information about the shoppers. But this is quite powerful. Now, for us, it means if we combine all those insights on product attributes, on consumer preferences, on their willingness to pay and their buying intention, and if you combine that with the business goal, then there's one step missing, which is creating a scoring function that decides basically what to offer to which consumer. In simple terms, this scoring function just considers the redemption probability, so how likely will a consumer purchase something, and the expected financial impact. So, for example, the expected revenue, the level of discount that is needed, or any kind of bidding or fee that is paid, for example, from a brand to run such a promotion. So the combination of this scoring then optimizes for whatever business goal the retailer or brand has, and the scoring decides in the final step what to offer to which consumer. So basically, the scoring is the backbone of our core solutions. And there are three core solutions that we offer to retailers. The first is called Smart Recommendations, which you can see on the left. Smart Recommendations takes existing offers or product-related content and ranks it for each single customer to achieve a specific goal. So let's make an example. Let's say you want to send a newsletter to each customer with the top 5 offers from your upcoming weekly leaflet. Then Smart Recommendations tells you what to offer to which customer. And this, of course, will drive customer satisfaction and loyalty because he or she feels understood and valued. He gets offers that he likes, so he's more likely to purchase them. Now, the second product, Optimized Discounts, is basically doing what it says. It's optimizing the discounts. So it's also ranking products according to the consumer's preferences, but it also now adjusts the discount level to cater for each customer's specific willingness to pay per product. And for example, some of the retailers we work with, they put their full assortment, so to speak, on sale, which means our system can choose freely from the full assortment to pick that product that best combines the retailer's business goal with the consumer's preferences. And the only information the retailer will provide us with is what is the maximum discount we are allowed to give per product. And then we optimize based on this maximum discount. And we optimize for revenue and for profit for the retailer. So again, it's a fully automated recommendation tool. And the third solution is called Programmatic Promotions. And it is like a white label promotion platform that retailers can use to monetize their own retail media with brands. So newsletters, their leaflets, their website space with advertisement, all of that can be monetized with brands. And the good thing is that brands are free to set up and run their own campaigns. So it's a self-managed tool. And they can then achieve their specific brand goals, like trial generation or brand switching. Now, the AI will also consider these brand goals and these campaigns in a way that for the brand, the ROI is maximized, but it will also still consider the retailer's financial goals in the back end, which makes it quite powerful for brands and attractive for brands to invest money into it. But also makes it attractive for the retailer because he stays in full control because of some features that we have added here. So all of this has been successfully tested and implemented with some of the world's leading retailers. And if we just look at our solutions optimized discounts, then we achieved on average across all these retailers a 5 times higher redemption rate compared to their existing approaches, which is in itself quite easy because you just have to give high discounts or you have to offer products that consumers bought in the past. But if you're at the same time able to increase the average basket size by 16% and you're able to reduce the cost of discounts needed by, as you can see here, 36%, which directly impacts the margin, then the combination of these financial KPIs is what really is appreciated by retailers. And as I said, it's run in a fully automated manner. So once set up, it runs without any humans involved. And basically, it can directly impact your financial goals. Which brings me to the question of what is the tech stack behind our AI and our solution? And thus, Patrick, please take over here because you will cover this part.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's talk about our system in more technical terms. On this slide, you can see in very broad strokes the flows of the data that we get from the retailers and that we send to retailers, some from left to right. SO1 gets the transactions, or as we call them, baskets, and we also get some other metadata about the purchases made by the customers of the retailer. These are identified by loyalty cards or other mechanism like user IDs in a mobile app, for example. This data gets processed. I'll speak about that in the next slide. And in the end, we can see you can see on the right that we send what we call impulses to customers. Those impulses are essentially the promotions that we generate that hopefully convince customers to purchase a product. And this whole process repeats, and that's taking into account the new facts about the transactions. Next slide, please. Okay. So 3 main interfaces that we use, or 3 main types of data that we receive and send. Let's just go from the top. So baskets. This is what we receive. These are the transactions. These are real-time or nightly files that are on line item granularity that we use to learn from customer behavior. We update their preferences, and we also optimize based on those for the retailer's goals. And we usually recommend that we receive the historical baskets from the retailers. Normally, we suggest around 1 year plus of baskets with and without the loyalty cards. The second point is campaigns. We need a set of campaigns with the products assigned to them and the incentives. Incentives can be a range of a discount. For example, this is the minimum discount that we can allow, and the maximum discount that we allow, or for example, other retailers can use something that we call a nominal discount, which is basically a fixed value, fixed amount off the shelf price. And other retailers can use, for example, the loyalty points. And these campaigns can be static. They can also change over time. Most of the retailers actually use a mix of both. And 3, this is what we send out, the so-called feeds. We basically need a medium to deliver the personalized campaigns. So this can be a checkout printer. When you go to the till, you pay, and as a customer, you will receive a bunch of coupons with your bill. This can be an app. This could be a kiosk system where you scan your loyalty card, or it could be an email newsletter. Sometimes the retailer needs redemption functionality. That is to connect their own point of sale systems to our system so that we can inject those discounts and those customers can redeem them. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is more or less the nitty-gritty details. What you can see on the top is the sort of example or approximation of what the retailer system could look like, because all of them are different. But this should help you to make the sort of mental connection of the concepts that I talked about before. So the most important part here from integration point of view is the feed API. This is what we expose to the retailers so that they can request our AI-based promotions, and then they can send them to the users via those communication channels that I mentioned before. And then the baskets and the campaigns will be fed to our system via APIs, as you can see. So we can run the learning and feature calculation pipelines. All of this traffic between us and the retailer is secured via VPN and encrypted. We actually run the whole engine in the cloud, so currently we're using Microsoft Azure. This is where all of our applications run. Next slide, please. So as you can see on this slide, these are sort of the features that we produce from the raw data that we receive from retailers. There's a lot of possibilities. So, for example, we have the purchase history. We have the data about regularity of the shopping. For example, does the customer go every week? Does the customer go every month to a specific store? We also have the secondary models that are sort of derived features based on those. For example, the price sensitivity. And there's also a possibility for other features like training a deep neural network. Next slide, please. So all of this data has to be stored and processed, and this is where Vertica comes into play at SO1. Among many pipelines that we run, like computation of features, model training for all those kinds of models, this is what we do using Vertica. We also pre-compute dashboards for business analytics. We can also perform ad hoc analytics or exploratory data analysis on demand, basically. We do not use the built-in ML functionality of Vertica. We actually rely on our own solutions, but we implemented them as UDFs, user-defined functions. So we actually do run the machine learning on the cluster. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So these are the main 4 reasons why we decided to use Vertica. Number 1 is that we have publicly available research papers. These convinced us that the technical solutions are very good and they would actually scale for the requirements that we have. Number 2 is the strong commercial support. Number 3 is SQL support, which greatly simplified our transition from our previous solution. And we can still use high-level language for large parts of our data processing, which really, really increases the productivity, especially among the machine learning team. And number 4, we had really good test results. It was very easy to adapt our code base, so it's very compatible. Porting of the whole pipeline with multiple 1,000 lines of SQL code was not really a big challenge. The query performance was very comparable to our previous solution, even without optimizations, without doing any specific tweaking on the table level. Cluster setup was fairly easy, thanks to the documentation, and the cluster is very stable and was very stable when we performed tests when we were considering Vertica. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Stefan.
Thanks very much, Patrick. So let's finally have a look at 4 key takeouts, or so to speak, the lessons learned from our perspective as a data disruptor. So first is there are potentials beyond imagination. So when we work with retailers, we often find that retailers often can't even imagine what value and potentials their basket data hold. And I hope I could have been able to show you today that there is a lot of value just in some transaction data, even without knowing anything else about the consumer. You can derive from the consumer, for example, any kind of social demographics. You can understand the preferences. You can understand willingness to pay. You can understand the purchase likelihood, intended purchases. So there's a massive amount of insights and potential that these data can offer. And if you use the right tools, it can get really powerful. Second, it's the devil of detail. So if retailers decide to use data-driven tools like ours, it's really the quality of data that is important, and that can get a devil. So it can take quite a bit of time to, for example, extract data from different systems or prepare the data such that it contains consistent information. While you might think that this should not be a problem nowadays, it still is for some of our partners, that the data quality is really not in a way that we would need it to then produce the results that we want to produce. And basically, there's this saying like bad data in, bad data out. we all know there's another way for saying that, but it's really about we have to spend effort on getting the data quality right, getting the level of detail right to then produce really good results. And the better the data, the better the results. Number 3, buy or die, which means we all know that it's quite tempting that retailers want to build everything themselves. But simply speaking, they are not a specialist in these kind of technology. And we have proven with different retailers that we achieved significantly better results than them in much less time and at significantly lower cost. So we've also seen retailers fail while doing that on themselves. And I believe there are only a few retailers out there that can really do that on their own and will have the time, the resources, and the capabilities to come up with a solution like this. And I mean, there are also many other challenges out there for retailers where they can also spend their ideas on, let's say logistics or other stuff, that really for this very specialized solution for promotion personalization or promotion optimization, there are just solutions out there that you can buy and you don't have to build on their own. And number 4, what we always learn is project management fuels the success of any kind of implementation. So when we talk about retailers, or when we talk with retailers about implementing our solutions, it's basically all about proper project management, and this can really drive speed and reduce costs. And this is something that we always pay attention to, that the project management is set up well, and then basically this solution can be delivered in really little time. So to give you an example, if the data quality is okay, if the data pipelines are set up between a retailer and us, basically we are able to deliver our solutions within a few days only. So it's really then depending on the quality of the retailer, but from our end, it's a software as a service solution, and it's easy to use and just simply available for the retailer. And with that, I will close my part and I will hand over back to Carl.
Thank you, Stefan. I encourage the audience to continue to insert few questions. Meanwhile, while you prepare the question for the Q&A and we get Stefan and Patrick to drink some waters, I will do a brief Vertica overview. Vertica is an advanced analytics platform which is built for scale and complexity of today's data-driven companies. It's a columnar multi-parallel processing database that can run 10 to 500 times faster or more compared to legacy systems. Just to give you an example, 50 times only faster means that from 8 hours, your queries running for such a long time can now be under 10 minutes. And if you take 500, even less than 1 minute. We also built inside Vertica advanced analytics and machine learning function directly in the database, so you can build and train predictive analytics model of massive volume of data without moving the data out. Also, as Patrick mentioned, you can also define user-defined function to load by building with external languages such as C++, R, or others that you find on the web, your own models so that they can still run with the data existing in the database with the speed of a columnar database. Last, you can use Vertica as a query engine to analyze data who are staying on Hadoop or S3 external data lakes, even without actually bringing those data into Vertica. Now, if you don't know it, probably you already encounter Vertica many times in your life, and we use these slides just to show how many of our large customers rely on the power of analytics behind their applications. So within Vertica, you can find systems to run like Uber for connected car, Guess for retails, or Optimal Plus for IoT, such as an example. Vertica is a software-only solution, it can reside and deploy where your data resides, so you can run high-performance analytics wherever you want them, all with license or subscription. Last but not least, you find all our ROI cases on the website, so you will enjoy, what customers are telling about financial benefits out of Vertica. And you can find even more documentation on our website, where you can also download the free trial version to test directly these under your use cases. Now it's time for the Q&A. I see that many questions are already popping in, Stefan, so be prepared. But normally, I keep a couple of them just to break the ice myself. So, by the way, you mentioned 6 years now of the company, so it's a long time, and you have a long experience of retail before that, and now I'm taking retail to the next level for data-driven retail, so to speak. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, for retail today is difficult. You show why they need to be ready for the change in the mind consumer, the competition, but they also need to, make sure that the internal people have the skills they need to face the challenges of how to use artificial intelligence. So the risk is that in hype world, you want to try everything everywhere and start with different dimensions. Now, since in those 6 years, you tap with many customers, many engagements, where should retailers start from? And what are the critical success factors for launching such a, let's say, data-driven retail process? How do you work with them?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Basically, what we do is we sit together with the retailer, and we first of all try to understand what the retailer's needs are, what they really want to achieve. And then we basically run a proper kickoff and a proper project management to identify the quality of data, the internal hurdles, who is involved in this project. So all these kind of things we try to steer together with the retailer to then come up with a proposal of how to best apply our solutions. Basically, when we look at the 3 solutions that I just mentioned, like smart recommendations, optimized discounts, programmatic promotions, our start with S01 was with programmatic promotions. But we understood from the market that this is a quite complex product because it involves so many different departments at a retailer. So this is why we split up the product and made even more easy to use products. So smart recommendations is really easy to use, and that's something we would always recommend to start with. And normally, to start such a product or to implement such a solution, we, for example, could start with just some stores and then do a pilot and compare these stores with other stores to just show that basically the results that we stated also in this presentation are true and that we can make them happen. But there's even easier way to basically start such a level of confidence, which is what we call an in vitro test, which basically means we take the retailer's data for a certain period of time, we analyze the data, and then we predict for the next period what the consumers would have purchased. And then the retailer can compare the real-time purchases with our predictions and can see how accurately we have predicted the purchases for the future. This is something this is quite easy doable, and this is something where we normally start, for example, this kind of project.
Okay, perfect. By the way, I also moved from one question on the audience because you start with this project, and it's a little bit of a provocative one, which say, I think it's a reality when some of the customers do not have the data. So the question is there a workaround? How do you move when there is no transaction history from the start? So if, for example, the data were not properly collected before. Can you still apply some of your learnings out of the other customer, or to move on? What would be required there?
Yeah, so first of all, we have built a system in a way that it is quite generalistically applicable. So we learn from different retailers in a generalistic way, but we don't share data between retailers, of course. So retailers or retail data are put into silos, and we never ever mix them up, which is very important for retailers, and I fully understand why. So we cater for that. Now, if a single retailer doesn't have any historical data available, this is not a problem, because the system just picks up on the ongoing transactions that the retailer is able to provide us with. It's just a question of how fast can we achieve the levels of efficiency or the levels of KPIs that are presented. So it just takes a little bit longer to basically understand the products, understand the consumers, understand all these connections between products, prices, promotions, consumers. So this just takes a little bit longer. But other than that, we don't need historical data. They are optional. They are just helpful to better kickstart such a project and to be really efficient with the first feed that we send out. But if we don't have that, then we just start like with the day or the data of today, and then it takes like 3-4 weeks, depending on the amount of data that we get, to basically understand consumers, products, and come up with recommendations. So no problem, basically.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now, I keep the other question out of myself. You know, data disruptor companies before you, they always push the attention on taking some action automation. And I say this because many of their retailers probably can claim that they are already very sophisticated into analyzing the data, gathering the data, but people who are data-driven, and what I also see in your case, are the one that actually do some action and take some action, some automation around that, just to be faster. You know, probably this is where your AE is making the difference. Now, compared to your previous work, how it was done, and today, where do you see AE helping here beyond the hype? Where do you see that the most advanced customer you work with are getting it?
Can you explain the question a little bit more?
So basically,
right?
Sorry. Artificial intelligence, where do you see helping most in defining these actions? Because they are very complex, like you said, and humans cannot do them, or because, you know, with respect to previous processes, where do they help more? Where do you think this is? Today's people in retail are not yet doing it.
Why they're not doing it is, for example, because they don't have the skill set, because they have many other things to do, because, as I said, the data quality might not be right, and they just focus on different topics. This is like a very specific use case that we apply here. It's very targeted at one specific problem, and it's basically, of course, I mean, I mentioned like these $500 billion that are spent on discounts. It's a large problem, a large challenge, but still in terms of retail, it might be a niche solution because it's also tied to loyalty programs. And I think this is why retailers might be a little bit reluctant in starting these kinds of things. And also, at least for German retailers, we understand that they are a little bit afraid of sharing their data with third parties like us, because it's a question of maybe power or losing control of this data, which I can understand from an emotional point of view. But for example, if you look at other countries like the United States, it's much more common that data is shared, and then that two companies together, like a solution provider as we are, and then the retailer together, they can really leverage the benefits from data. And I think it's also a mentality issue with some companies.
Okay. Another question I see here is you talk about AI, and somehow it can appear as a black box for business manager. You mentioned before yourself. How does the organization learn from your AI solution? How do the category campaign manager are changing after this is inserted in the way they work?
Yeah, basically they don't learn anything. It's basically a black box approach that we do. It's basically intended to not train people, but intended to reduce the complexity for those people and help them with tasks that can be automated, so they can basically focus on other stuff they have to do. So it's really what we try to do is to basically take the decision-making process from the retailer, because we believe that the AI, the artificial intelligence, is better to manage the complex amount of data. And I mean, you have to think about so many things that it's really hard for a manager to basically come up with the right recommendation. And this approach allows you to basically run A/B tests continuously to basically improve over time. And the only thing you have to do here is basically to get your strategy right. So it's helping the retailer actually, but it's not training them. Of course, with some large retailers, so let's say the top 10 retailers in the world, we might also talk about a customized solution and about co-creation of this kind of solution for a retailer, that it can run on premise for them, for example. And then, of course, we exchange knowledge. So we bring in our people, they train the retailers, we together build these kind of solutions, basically taking our existing ideas and adding to that, and then tying it to the retail-specific problem, which might be different from retail to retail. So this is in general also possible, but the core solutions that we have is, as I said, software as a service, ready to use, and it's not sharing data, it's just a black box, and you can just control the results and can just manage the results. Of course, there are some reports that we deliver, but again, these reports are only there to basically check on the performance.
Okay, perfect. Now we move to a little bit of more technical questions. One is, how many nodes are in your cluster, and one is your data cluster size? Of course, Patrick Stefan reminds that you can talk in general where you don't feel confident to reveal specific information.
Sure, absolutely. I can tell you that we have currently 6 nodes. We actually recently scaled them up. The exact number of data I cannot tell you, but each of these nodes, 6 nodes, has an SSD, quite a large one attached to it, and they have around hundreds gigs of RAM each. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. And in such context, now you build a cloud solution, by the way, over Azure as a specific infrastructure as a service, and you need to integrate with different environment of your customers. You touched briefly, but if you can elaborate a little bit more, where was Vertica helping you? It was more in the dashboarding in real time, in the ingestion of data, in the working with the customer specific requirements?
Yes, Vertica was very helpful when it comes to ingestion of data, because it supports the diverse formats. Of course, for some retailers, we have to write some specific integration. Sometimes we have to do certain data mapping. We have to derive certain features and fields from what they send us. That's quite convenient with Vertica, if not only because it's just pure SQL. Also, with the reporting, yes, we do have dashboards for our CAS team so that they can report to the clients on the performance. What is, for example, the redemption rate?
Okay, perfect. Stefan, another question from the audience is, today we did a lot of example of grocery, especially, or food stores, but obviously this is, you mentioned also fast-moving consumer goods. What are the other, so to speak, verticals that your solution applies to?
Yeah, so basically, as I said before, it's a generalistic solution. It's not restricted to any vertical, but you will see differences in performance, differences in the level of efficiency that we can reach. So basically what we need to work with a retailer is ideally an identifier, so let's say a loyalty card system that is in place. And for example, we need for each product about 10,000 sales that we can observe, and then we can understand all the attributes about this product. So to build this map that I showed you, the product map with the 800-dimensional attribute space, to build that for product, we need about 10,000 observations. So we're talking about large-scale retail, and this normally you find mostly in groceries and drugstores, of course. And also, the benefit of groceries and drugstores is that the consumer is shopping there so often. So as Patrick described, basically we send out an impulse and we observe the reaction to the impulse. So we send out a coupon or make a recommendation for a product, and then we observe if the consumer has purchased this product. And then we can learn from it. We can learn from he has purchased it, or we can learn from he or she hasn't purchased it. And basically, the more often and the more frequent and the more timely we can observe that, the better it is. So the better results get, because it's a self-learning system, and the system can then adjust better and faster to the new situation. It can pick up on trends. It can pick up on changes in listings, for example. It can even understand if a product is on stock or on shelf or not, and can automatically, for example, in a real-time system, it can automatically understand if the product is available or not. So, for example, Patrick described these kiosk systems in the store entrance where the consumers can go to, scan the loyalty card, and then they get their offers printed. In that moment, when we print the offers, we can check if the product is on shelf or not. And so if it's available or not, to just not waste this precious advertising space and to not dissatisfy the consumer by a promotion that is just not available to the consumer. So as I said, the more often we can observe consumers, the more often we can observe purchase, the better it is. But we don't care if it's fashion or electronics or do-it-yourself or convenience stores or, as I said, grocery retail or drugstores. It works with all these different verticals, but of course we will not achieve the levels of efficiency and the KPIs like 5 times higher redemption rates or 40% reduction in cost. That's something that we have to challenge. And as our heritage is in fast-moving retail, we have currently not experience that we can share with you on other verticals, but it's totally applicable also on us.
Okay, good, very good. By the way, now we are already top of the hour. It's 6 o'clock, so we need to close the call. However, for the question which are still unanswered, as you see on the slide, you see both my contacts and mainly also Stefan contacts. So feel free to reach both of us for further questions, and we will make sure that we answer them. I also would like to remind you that you will find a PDF copy of the slides after this webinar is released, fully recorded. And there is already a success case story out of Segmentor 1 together with Vertica that you can already download from the Vertica website when you go to customer case section. So today, thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you very much, Patrick, to both of you. It was a pleasure to see such an innovative company of Segmentor 1 be part of the Data Disruptor. And this concludes our event today. So everybody have a great day.
Thank you very much.